My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I sat in the parking lot of First Community Bank, watching through the glass doors as the teller inside typed something into her computer. I had driven there in my bathrobe. I didn't even realize it until I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. 63 years old, grey hair still pinned back from the night before, wearing a faded blue robe with a coffee stain on the left sleeve. I didn't care. I had one thought in my mind and one thought only: stop the check before midnight. I want to tell you that I was angry, but that's not quite right. Anger is hot. What I felt in that parking lot was something colder, something that had been building for 2 years, maybe longer, and had finally settled into something quiet and certain, the way water turns to ice. Let me back up. My name is Judith. No, wait, I've been calling myself that in my head all night, borrowing names that feel easier to say out loud. My name is Harriet Louise Crane. I am 63 years old. I worked as a registered nurse for 31 years at Mercy General in Columbus, Ohio. I raised my son Liam by myself after his father passed from a heart attack when Liam was 9 years old. I did not remarry. I did not ask anyone for help. I worked double shifts on holidays so Liam could have a good Christmas. I drove 2 hours each way to watch every single one of his high school baseball games. When he got into Ohio State, I cried for 40 minutes in my car before going back inside to make dinner. I am telling you this not because I want sympathy. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what it means to build a life with your hands, and then watch someone treat it like it costs nothing. Liam met Cassandra at a company retreat in the fall of 2022. She was 29. He was 34. He called me 2 days after they met, and he sounded different, lighter, almost giddy, and I thought, good, he deserves this. He had been working too hard, spending too many evenings alone in that condo in Dublin. I was glad someone made him sound like that. The first time I met her was at a dinner in January. Liam took us both to a restaurant downtown, the kind with cloth napkins folded into swans and no prices on the menu. I wore my good blue blouse. I brought flowers. Cassandra arrived 20 minutes late, kissed Liam on the cheek, glanced at me and said, "Oh, you're smaller than I imagined." I laughed. I thought it was an awkward compliment. Looking back, I think it was the first test. Cassandra's family, her parents, Howard and Lynette, lived in a large house in Upper Arlington. Howard ran a commercial real estate firm. Lynette sat on the board of 2 non-profits and hosted fundraiser luncheons. They drove matching white SUVs and wore their money the way some people wear perfume. You noticed it the moment you walked into the room. I am a woman who bought her couch at a furniture clearance sale and is proud of it. The first time I met Howard and Lynette was at a dinner they hosted at their house, about 3 months after Liam and Cassandra got engaged. The house was beautiful. I'll give them that. Lynette gave me a tour and I told her the kitchen was lovely, and she smiled the way people smile when a child says something charming. At dinner, Howard mentioned that he had been looking at venues for the wedding. "We were thinking the Worthington estate," he said. "It's beautiful in June. Cass has had her heart set on it since she was little." I nodded. I said that sounded lovely. Then he looked at Liam and said, "We'll need to work out the financials soon. These things book up fast." And Liam looked at me. Not at Cassandra, not at Howard, at me. I felt something shift in my chest, very slightly, like a door easing open. 2 weeks later, Liam came to my house for Sunday dinner. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework for 12 years, and he asked me if I could help pay for the wedding. I asked him how much they were thinking. He said 85, maybe 90,000, possibly a little more. I set down my fork. "Liam," I said, "that is more than I made in 2 years of nursing." He said he knew. He said Howard and Lynette had agreed to contribute 50,000, but that left a gap. He said Cassandra really wanted this specific venue, this specific caterer, this specific photographer who flew in from New York. He said it would mean everything to her. He said, and this is the part I've replayed 1,000 times, he said, "Mom, you've always been there for me. I just need you one more time." One more time. As though every shift I ever worked, every birthday party I ever threw alone, every night I ever sat by his bed when he had a fever, as though all of that was simply a long line of one more times. I said yes. I know what you're thinking. I was thinking it too, somewhere underneath the part of me that just wanted my son to be happy. But I said yes. I took out $40,000 from the retirement account I had been building for 15 years. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself I would feel good at the reception when I looked around and knew I helped make it happen. The planning started in March. Cassandra had a vision, and a vision, I learned quickly, was a word that meant her opinion was the only one that mattered. The venue was booked, the caterer was booked, the florist, the string quartet, the custom stationery, all booked. Cassandra handled everything, and Liam rubber-stamped every decision. I was not consulted on a single one. I told myself that was fine, it was their wedding, I was just the bank. In April, Lynette called me. She said she wanted the mothers to go dress shopping together, for themselves, for the wedding. She suggested a boutique in Worthington. I drove 40 minutes to meet her there on a Tuesday morning. At the boutique, Lynette picked out a champagne-coloured gown that cost $800. She asked my opinion, and I said it was beautiful, which it was. Then she asked me what I was thinking of wearing, and I showed her a photograph on my phone, a pale green dress I'd seen at a department store, $180, and I had thought it was quite elegant. Lynette looked at the photograph for a moment and said, "Oh, well, it's very sweet." I bought the pale green dress. May came. The wedding was 3 weeks away. And then Liam called me on a Tuesday evening, and the moment I heard his voice, I knew something was wrong. He had a particular way of starting sentences when he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't like. A small pause, a breath, like he was bracing. "Mom," he said, "I need to talk to you about the reception." I waited. Cassandra's family has a lot of people coming. Her parents' friends, her dad's business contacts, people she went to college with. And the venue, the way they've set up the seating, there's limited space in the main ballroom. I waited. "We're going to have you in the annex. It's really nice, actually. They've decorated it separately and—" "The annex," I said. "It's connected. You can still hear the toasts through the sound system and—" "Liam," I said, "are you telling me that I will not be seated in the same room as you at your wedding reception?" There was a pause. "It's just a space issue, Mum." I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the $40,000. I thought about the double shifts. I thought about the baseball games. "All right," I said, and I hung up. My friend Rosalie. We've known each other since nursing school in 1985. She came over the next day. I told her everything over coffee, and she sat across from me at my clearance sale couch, and she looked at me with that flat, patient expression she gets when she's about to say something true. "Harriet," she said, "you have been told you are not welcome at your own son's wedding reception, the one you paid for." I said I knew. She said, "Honey, what are you going to do about it?" I didn't answer her then, but I thought about it for 3 days. The day before the wedding, I drove to the venue to drop off some table centerpiece items Liam had asked me to bring. I parked and walked through the side entrance, and I could hear voices in the main corridor. Cassandra and Lynette talking to the event coordinator. I wasn't trying to listen, I was just walking. But I heard Cassandra say my name. And then I heard her say, "She's fine in the annex. Honestly, I just don't want her hovering in the main room making things awkward. She means well, but she's not really our kind of people, you know. Not our kind of people. I stood very still in that hallway. I set down the centerpiece boxes. I turned around. I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, and I looked at nothing. Then I drove home. I did not call Liam that night. I did not call Cassandra. I did not send a text. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea I didn't drink, and I thought about everything I had done, and everything I had allowed, and everything I had excused, and slowly, quietly, something inside me stopped. Not broke. Stopped. Like a clock that has simply decided it doesn't need to run anymore. I opened my laptop. I found the wire transfer confirmation for the $40,000 I had sent to the wedding coordinator's account 6 weeks earlier. The payment terms I had signed, at Liam's request, had a cancellation clause. If cancelled more than 48 hours before the event, 70% was refundable. It was currently 9:47 p.m. The wedding was Saturday at 2 p.m. I did the math. I put on my bathrobe. I got in the car. The branch manager at First Community Bank is a woman named Sandra, who has known me for 11 years. She was not on duty at 10 p.m. on a Friday, but the overnight manager, a young man named Dennis, took one look at my face and sat me down and asked me very gently what he could do. I told him I needed to initiate a stop payment and a reversal on a wire transfer. I told him it was urgent. I told him the timeline. Dennis made 3 phone calls. He filled out paperwork. He got a supervisor on the line. And at 11:22 p.m. on a Friday night, the reversal was initiated. $28,000 was coming back to me. I drove home. I made fresh tea. I sat at the kitchen table until 2 in the morning, and somewhere in that quiet I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 years. Not anger, not grief, something cleaner than both. At 8:15 the next morning my phone began to ring. First it was the wedding coordinator, then it was Liam, then it was Howard, then it was Lynette, then it was Liam again, and this time he didn't pause before his sentence. He just said, "Mom, what did you do?" I told him exactly what I did. I told him calmly and clearly. I told him about the reversal and the timeline and the 48-hour clause, and then I told him what I had heard in the hallway. Not our kind of people. There was a very long silence on the phone. Then Liam said, "She didn't mean it like that." And something in me, that last small thread I had been holding, let go. "I love you," I said, "but I am not going to pay to be invisible, and I am not going to apologize for that." I hung up. The wedding happened. I wasn't there. I got a text from Liam at 4:30 p.m., 2 sentences. It said, "I hope you're happy. This was the worst day of my life." I read it twice. I set my phone face down. I went and watered my garden. What happened in the months after is a longer story, but I will tell you the essential parts. Howard and Lynette, it turned out, had not paid their $50,000 contribution. They had been working on the liquidity, which is a phrase wealthy people use when they mean they don't actually want to spend their money. The wedding venue had held the bulk of their deposit, but without my reversal, the catering balance had come due, and there was a shortfall. Liam paid it on a credit card. 3 credit cards, actually. Cassandra was furious with me. She told Liam I had sabotaged her wedding. She told her parents I was mentally unstable. She posted something on social media, vague enough to be deniable, specific enough to be cruel, about toxic family members who can't let go. I did not respond to any of it. Rosalie called me that Sunday morning, and I could hear her trying not to laugh. "I heard," she said, "Howard scrambling. I told her I had not done it to cause problems for Howard. I had done it because I heard what I heard, and I finally listened to what it meant. It was 8 months before Liam called me again. Not a text, an actual phone call, on a Thursday evening in February, when the snow was coming down outside my window. He asked if he could come over. I said yes. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table, always the same table, and he didn't look like the boy who had called me giddy from a company retreat anymore. He looked tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep. "I've been in therapy," he said. I didn't say anything. "I've been thinking about the last 2 years, about how I let things happen, how I kept telling myself you were fine with things when I knew you weren't." He looked at his hands. "I heard what Cassandra said in the hallway. She told me eventually. She thought it was no big deal." I said, "I know you love her." "I do," he said. And then, "But I don't think she loves me the way I thought she did. I think she loved the idea, the version of things she had planned." I didn't tell him I'd suspected this from the champagne restaurant when she arrived 20 minutes late and called me small. I just listened. "I should have stood up for you, Mom. 100 times I should have said something. And I didn't." Here's what I said, not because it was easy, it wasn't, but because it was true. "I should have said something too. I kept quiet because I wanted you to be happy, and I told myself that was love. But it wasn't. It was fear. I was afraid if I pushed back, I'd lose you." He looked up. "You almost did," I said, "not because of anything I did, but because you stopped seeing me." He cried then. Liam hasn't cried in front of me since he was 14. I let him. I got up and put the kettle on, because that is what you do, and when I came back and set his mug in front of him, I put my hand on his shoulder for a moment and didn't say anything. Liam and Cassandra separated 7 months after the wedding. I'm not going to pretend that didn't bring me a complicated kind of relief. It did. I am human. But I also watched my son go through something painful, and there is no satisfaction in that. He comes for Sunday dinner now, every week. He sits at my kitchen table, and sometimes we talk about what happened, and sometimes we just talk about his job or the weather, or the terrible television show he's been watching. Last month he helped me fix the gutter on the back of the house that has been leaning for 3 years. We stood in the backyard after drinking lemonade, and he said, "I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you weren't enough." I told him he didn't need to keep apologizing. He said, "I know, I'm doing it for me." I look back now at the woman sitting in that parking lot in her bathrobe at 10 p.m., and I don't feel embarrassed by her. I feel something close to proud, because she had spent 34 years taking care of everyone around her and asking for very little in return. And on one Friday night in May, she finally decided that she was worth taking care of too. Not our kind of people. No, I am not. I am the kind of people who work double shifts and drive 2 hours for a baseball game and raise a son alone and love him more than he ever knew, until, finally, he did. That is the only kind of people I have ever wanted to be. I used to think that the most painful thing a mother could experience was watching her child suffer. I was wrong. The most painful thing is realizing that you taught your child without meaning to, that your silence was the same as your consent. For a long time I told myself I stayed quiet because I loved Liam, and I did love him. I still do, more than I know how to say. But love without honesty isn't really love. It's just accommodation dressed up in something warmer. Every time I wrote a check and said nothing, every time I swallowed a feeling and smiled through it, I was teaching him that I could be moved to the back of the room and I would find a way to be fine with it. He learned that lesson because I taught it. That's the part I had to sit with. Not what Cassandra said in that hallway, those words stung, but they were hers to carry. What I had to reckon with was my own role in how things got that far. I had been a woman of tremendous endurance my whole life. 31 years of nursing will do that to you. You learn to push through, to keep going, to not burden anyone with what you're feeling. Those were good qualities in a hospital. At home, with my son, they became a way of disappearing. What I did in that bank parking lot at 10 o'clock on a Friday night was not revenge. I want to be clear about that. It was the first honest thing I had done in 2 years. I stopped pretending that being excluded didn't matter. I stopped performing gratitude I didn't feel. I acted in accordance with what I actually knew to be true, that I had worked too hard and loved too fully to be made invisible, and that no amount of wanting my son to be happy justified letting him believe that was acceptable. There's something that happens when you finally do the thing you were afraid to do. Not fireworks, not immediate relief, just a kind of quiet settling, like your own spine finding its natural position after years of slumping. I drove home that night, and I made tea, and I sat in my kitchen, and for the first time in months I felt like myself. Liam needed to face what he had allowed, not because I wanted him to suffer, but because a person cannot grow around a truth they've never been asked to see. The consequences that followed, the credit cards, the fallout, the separation, none of that was my doing. It was the natural weight of choices he had been making for 2 years, finally landing where it belonged. And when he came back, when he sat at my table again in February with snow coming down outside, and said he'd been in therapy and he was sorry, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and grateful and a little sad for all the time we'd lost. That's what the truth costs sometimes. It cost you the comfortable version of things, but the comfortable version was never real. What I hope Liam carries forward is not the lesson that mothers keep score. I hope he carries the understanding that the people who love you most are not the ones who will accept anything. They are the ones who will eventually tell you the truth, even when it's expensive, even when it's hard, even when they are standing in a parking lot in a bathrobe at 11 o'clock at night. That kind of love takes more courage than any check I ever wrote, and it was the only kind worth giving.